Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video. Now recently Honda updated their Africa Twin lineup for 2024 and they made a few big changes which seem to hit a nerve with some of you guys. In fact, this is one of the most commented on videos of the past few months, and so in this video we'll run through some of the best reactions, and along the way I'll tell you which I agree with and which I might not. Now the big one it seems is that Honda have said they'll only be offering the bigger, more spec'd out and touring friendly adventure sports variant with their DCT transmission. Now DCT basically acts like an automatic box, making the shifts on your behalf, although you can switch to manual and use the buttons on the switchgear. But admittedly it doesn't really feel the same as riding a regular mechanically shifting bike. And so Big T18 Cross said, "I was considering one of these next year, but I think it now being DCT only will make me look elsewhere." Sub to Triple Threat RC added, "I'd want a manual adventure sport." And Ross Shears 6726 said, "I'm so happy that I bought a 2023 Adventure Sports electronic suspension manual, now a rather unique bike." Now if we included all of the comments about there not being DCT, then we'd be here for absolutely ages, but just trust me, this change from Honda definitely got a reaction. Although I should add that some commenters like the changes. Mr. David Race said, "Good changes for both bikes, all makes good sense." And Kiwi Kid USA left a small tale describing how he used to think DCT was a bad idea, but he did some research, tried it out, bought one, and hasn't looked back, even for off-roading. DCT in my experience has always been a bit divisive, and so it looks like that's still the case coming into the 2024 model year. But I think the point is about choice, and some riders far preferring at least to have the option of the manual shift bike, and on this one, I think I have to agree. Now I should point out that after I made the video, Mitty Kivi Civi commented saying that Honda's website for Italy gives the 2024 Adventure Sports available also without DCT, so with a manual box. Is this restriction a UK only thing? And so I did some chasing and spoke to the Honda UK press team, and they confirmed that this will indeed be market specific, so you'll need to go and check your local Honda website. So potentially good news for some people outside the UK then, at least in some countries. Now the other solution perhaps, if you want an Adventure Sports but with the option to shift with your foot, is to get the DCT pedal shift kit, which is part of the accessories catalogue again for 2024, and that comes in at 379 quid. This is basically a replication of the plus and minus shift buttons on the switchgear, so it's still entirely electronic, but in the form factor of a traditional gear shift foot lever. Now I've tried this out recently on a 2023 Africa Twin, and look, it doesn't have the same feeling. There isn't the resistance and the mechanical clunk as you go into the next gear, and there is a bit of a lag with the shifts, naturally with it being electronic and DCT, but from an ergonomic perspective, if you're riding off-road perhaps and you're stood up and you'd rather shift with your foot than reaching for the buttons, then it's definitely a good option to look into. Still, if you're in the UK and you don't like the sound of all that, and it does add to the cost a lot as well with the DCT plus that accessory, then it's worth remembering that they've given the base model a little more all-round capability this year, as opposed to being very off-road biased in its spec like the previous generation. So it now gets tubeless tyres, for example, to make for easier repairs for the majority of riders. There's the option of their semi-active electronically adjustable suspension package, and also, as standard, a new 5-way adjustable windscreen. Now Renato Sales 1163 says, "Before, I didn't want the basic Africa Twin tube type wheels, and I couldn't afford the Africa Twin Adventure Sports. Now I don't want the DCT Adventure Sports, but Honda made the Africa Twin basic model just perfect. Now I can trade my actual bike for my dream bike. Thanks, Honda." I've got to say as well, tubeless tyres are, for me, a real pain in the arse if you're majority riding on the road. I recently had a V-Strom 800DE from Suzuki as a press bike, and I ended up getting a puncture on the motorway a few miles from home. So instead of a quick plug and a gas cartridge to pump it back up, I had to get someone to come and get me, to go and get my van, to go and pick it up and load it in the back. So for me, this is a big improvement to the Africa Twin, and I hard agree with those comments. And the base model looks pretty good as a more versatile adventure bike. The only big downside I can see versus the Adventure Sports is the smaller fuel tank, so it's 18.8 litres as opposed to 24.8. Now the other big talking point that really did seem to hit a nerve is the new 19-inch front wheel on the Adventure Sports. Combined with the DCT only in some markets, it really does seem like they're doubling down on positioning it as an adventure tourer with a bit more road bias, and they've also removed a little bit of suspension travel to make it lower slung. But yeah, this new smaller wheel at the front, it definitely got some people people's goat. I love my Africa Twin Adventure Sport with a 21-incher. Doesn't feel vague, and on-road it's great, says EO Matt. Roshir6726 again adds, for where I live in Western Canada, BC, the package with the 21 front tyre is a huge asset as we have miles of gravel adventure roads. Then the 21 on my 2018 Africa Twin Adventure Sports never feels vague on the road. Awesome both on and off-road, especially with a set of meters, says Simon Thomas 5367. I don't know though, I think I would encourage you to reserve judgment on this one until you at least get to demo one. Without doubt, if you're riding majority off-road, then a 21 front is going to be much better. But if you're riding mainly on the road, well, I'm in the fortunate position of being able to ride a lot of bikes back to back, week in, week out. And when you jump onto a bike with a 21-inch front, it almost always feels less precise. That's not to say that you can't get on with it. In fact, you get used to it pretty quickly. And my own bike, a Triumph Tiger 800 XCA, which I ride mainly on the road and has a 21-inch front, you know, I've got no problems with it as such. But I guess the point here is that Honda are trying to make it not just fine, but better and more suited to the type of riding that they think their customers are doing on the Adventure Sports. So on this one, I think I'm with Honda, providing it handles how I'd expect when I finally get to test one out. Again, for balance, there are some fans of this change though. Andrew Eli 3271 says, love it, happy to have a smaller front wheel. Martin Copley 4482 says, that 19-inch wheel does it for me. Watch out BMW, the best off-roader is coming for you. And that's a reference to the fact that their 1250 GS and the new 1300 GS, a bestseller for many, many years, also runs on a 19-inch front. And then Vitor Moray 9567 even goes so far to ask, will current Africa Twin Adventure Sports owners be able to fit the new 19-inch wheel? It can be a very good on-road agility mod. I highly doubt that it'll be easily compatible, but do keep us posted. Now, the other outcome of it being on a smaller front wheel and with shorter suspension is that the Adventure Sports now sits a little bit lower in the seat, so it's adjustable between 835 and 855 mil with the standard seat, or with the low seat option, it goes down to a pretty impressive 795 mil. So that's well down from the 850 and 870 of the previous gen, with the low seat option coming in at 825 mil. Yes, so much better being lower, said Ed T. Hansen 6499. Definitely going to pull the trigger on this one, especially with the lowered height, said Mr. T 9976. And I'm excited, they've addressed the seat height issue for me. That really makes it very competitive for touring, said Mike Fusco 7215. And I think I've got to agree here. It makes sense for a bike that you're potentially going to be riding 2 up with luggage to at least have the option of making it pretty low so that all riders have a chance of getting both feet planted. And for moderately tall riders, 855 mil still seems reasonable enough, although I should add there's no option in the accessories catalog to go any higher. Now, another popular change also seems to have been the addition of the electronic suspension that was previously only available on the Adventure Sports, now on the regular Africa Twin. So you can get this bike either with the manual gearbox with electronic suspension or DCT with electronic suspension. Parkis says, great video Bob, I've got a 2021 DCT standard bike and was wanting an Adventure Sport for the tubeless tires and electronic suspension. Probably going to get another standard bike now with just that. GCT 0239 says, I've always wished for electronic suspension and tubeless tires on the standard and kept telling my dealer about it. It paid off that other customers said the same. Honda listened, and that's great. Although Davfon23 adds that to me, if electronic suspension makes it heavier and more prone to failure, I would opt for regular suspension, which is a fair point. It does add a few kilograms and also 1,500 quid to the price. So pros and cons, but I really like the versatility of electronic suspension and the fact that you can change the preload quickly if you have a luggage and a passenger, or if you want to go out solo, and then you can firm it up for more sporty rides or soften it for motorway cruising or get it perfectly dialed in for off-roading, and that's all through the switchgear without having to get off and get any tools out. So look, for me it's a big plus and it suits the Africa Twin very well, and at least with this one you've got the option to spec it if you wish. Now, as always, the looks have been very well received with this bike. For me, it's the best looking adventure bike on the market by a massive stretch, and these little tweaks for 2024 just make it slightly more chiseled and modern. The paint jobs also look great with a small update to the graphics, and TTCH2PZ says that the tricolor Africa Twin has an iconic look that never gets old, which is a statement that I wholeheartedly agree with. Moody9931 also adds, definitely better looking than the new GS, and so I'd love to know from you guys guys down in the comments which bike you think looks better, the Africa Twin or the new 1300 GS. For me, all day, Africa Twin, although I'm not as upset by the new GS as some people seem to be. So it's a decent update from Honda, although some qualms from some riders. But did they miss anything huge? Well, Cortilagab asks, any news on their patent application for a supercharger for the Africa Twin, which is something I also read about earlier this year. A supercharged Africa Twin would be something to behold, but I fear this particular patent application was one of those speculative attempts to protect their intellectual property rather than something that's imminent for production. Anathema also says, was really hoping for adaptive cruise, looks great though. And yeah, in some areas this bike is lagging a little behind the market, especially some of the slightly larger capacity bikes like the new GS, the Multistrada V4, the KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, and the Tiger 1200, all of which offer some sort of radar-enabled safety features. But you've got to remember that Honda are rarely first with this sort of stuff. They only added regular cruise control to the Africa Twin for the 2020 model, and that's a whopping 7 years after BMW offered it as a factory option on the GS. So perhaps don't hold your breath for radars anytime soon. As always, I'd love to know what you think of these takes down in the comments below, so do let me know. We also made a similar video for the GS, which I'll put on screen now in case you haven't seen it already. Do hit subscribe if you've not already to see more of the latest motorcycle news right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next one.